artists or records that we release on the record label not only kind of exist in their own right, but they're this calling card to the world and to musicians and other labels and other people who are looking to make music, that they then pay us to make their music here as well. So it's like the world was seeing this like nicely integrated business where there's people working out front and there's people making music at the back, but that wasn't really happening. So the move to this space is kind of just the fulfillment of what the rest of the world thought Spacebomb was doing. We have some understanding of how the studio works and what people need, and the people in here are the same. You see them working in the office, and Trey's in here recording, but he also has a deep understanding and functions in the publishing company. So that's the idea of this space, that it all works together.
Not only does it make sense for the office to be in a space where everything's centralized, but we just needed a space where we could invest in ourselves and get into that sort of feedback loop of like, it's a space that we're comfortable in, and then it's a space that we're comfortable in for the artist, and then we're comfortable, and then people are paying us to come here, and like, it makes the business work. It all works hand in hand, and I think a lot of music does more so than we might think, than a listener might think. It is always sort of shaking hands with a business structure behind the scenes of some extent. And if it's not, then that's also reflected in the music usually. The sound of a snare drum, whether it's like the 311 snare drum or the Pearl Jam snare drum or the Prince snare drum or Steely Dan snare drum or Ray Charles snare drum, it's like by themselves, those are all different snare drums, but like by themselves, if you just hear that sound in a room, it's like, is it good or bad? There's no good or bad really when it comes to sound, pure sound. And so there will always be, I think, a little bit of a magnetic nostalgic quality when you're using certain pieces of gear, because they just sound like that. If you run all your shit through tape and through tube preamps and through tube mics and through a tube board and master it to tape, like, it's going to sound a certain way, and that's going to be cool to a certain group of people. But it's also like, now I think it's also actually like kind of uncool to a certain group of people.
I think it happens pretty unintentionally. I think that happens just because we only have a little slice of what they maybe had over here. And then maybe a thing that we love, a whole other sound, maybe we don't have any of that gear, but we still love it and we still like try to go for it. And that causes its own effect. So I think the result of what we make here is kind of just the sum of the pieces we have, and then the collection of our excitement as individuals coming together. I guess I feel that way because there are a lot of sounds that we've often tried to go after, and I never feel like I've ever been like, oh, I reproduced a sound. Every time I go after something, I'm striving for closeness to some other sound. Usually, I think as even Questlove, I read it in his book recently, copying and covering and emulating and imitating, it just gets you going. If I hear a song and I want, most of the times I'm thinking about with cymbals, and a little bit with drums too. If I want a brightness, I'm probably going to go with a newer cymbal, and sometimes newer drums, or plastic heads versus coated heads. But that brightness thing is definitely, I feel like, time and our oils on cymbals definitely affect them. The oils from our skin and the patina that accrues, and like just the strange layer of grime that sticks on and oxidation. I feel like that's like the biggest, I think, physical coloring,